Hey guys, hey, this is Anne Marie, the Anti-HR HR lady, and I thought today it would be a good idea to do a reintroduction of who I am because I know I have a lot of new followers since a lot of you joined me when I posted the video, which I also shot in my bathroom, entitled "Not Letting Them Run You Out of There Is Not the Flex You Think It Is." And it drew a lot of you to this community, so welcome to the Anti-HR community. If you enjoy this video and other content that I share, please take a moment to pause, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and also provide constructive comments. I appreciate those all the time, but thank you for being here. But I thought it would be a good idea to do a little reintroduction video, and I intentionally decided to do this one while I'm getting ready to shoot content for my travel channel. Some people who've been with me for a while found me when I was on the Ball Girl Will Travel, which is my travel style channel, my travel fashion style channel. And I shoot content daily for both. I'm an entrepreneur. I live in Mexico. I left the United States 3 years ago. And I actually started out intending to start a travel business around my love of travel, but I decided to create the Anti-HR because it became very clear to me very quickly that there are a lot of women, especially Black women, who are really miserable in their jobs. And I decided that I should share with them how I managed to leave corporate America and how I financed leaving corporate America by leaving a discriminatory hostile workplace through a negotiated separation with severance. And I had done this more than once. And so I decided that I would create a business around providing employee-focused HR advice and also teach people who wanted to know how I did what I did, how I did what I did. So that's why I created this business. But I also have a travel business. So I often get up in the morning and I get ready to shoot content for my travel channel. And a lot of times while I'm doing that, ideas come to me about HR. And so I will but sometimes turn on the camera and just shoot it right then and there so I don't lose the thought, which is how I made the video that went viral, which I totally did not expect anybody to really think was that interesting. But some people were watching that video, they made a comment saying how they thought it was unprofessional of me to be putting on my makeup while I was shooting a video. And that, it's unprofessional, it doesn't look good. So I want to address, none of those people are in the community right now because they've already been blocked. Let me just put that out there. I don't argue with people on the internet. I especially don't argue with strangers on the internet. And while we may have a lot of kinship around a lot of these issues that I talk about, the reality is that we're all really strangers. We don't know each other in real life. I don't argue with people I don't know. So if you're looking for somebody to troll, you're looking for somebody to argue with, you're coming in here to just critique my appearance or other people's comments, trust and believe you won't last very long. And I won't call you out. I won't even argue with you. I will just delete your comment and block you from my channel. I don't do respectability politics. We don't do respectability around here. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King both died in suits. Those that hate us don't care how well we dress, how nicely we speak. So if you are from the school of respectability, this is probably not the space for you. Okay, so that's one little pointer that should tell you a little bit about my personality, right? There are other people who have asked me about my makeup routine. My makeup routine is to wear as little makeup as I can to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish, which is to even out my skin tone and to also not damage my skin in the process. So I don't like heavy foundations and things like that. I basically wear concealer and foundation powder. That's it. I don't really wear a lot of makeup, but I usually put concealer under my eyes because we all know you get to be a certain age, the shadows start. So I usually do that, but I don't wear a lot of makeup, and I don't feel qualified to give people makeup advice. But for those people who've asked me what kind of makeup I use primarily, I used to wear bare minerals. So that was what I said in a comment, but actually what I use now is Sephora powder, which I actually get better results from. And I like NARS powder. And I usually use a combination of those two things after I use concealer. And I like Tarte concealer, which is what I'm putting on right now. And I also like NARS. I like NARS, the brand, a lot in terms of makeup. NARS right here. And I also use some Makeup Forever concealer and another one from Sephora that a girl in Sephora turned me on to when I was looking for makeup, because I used to be a big fan of, I'm looking over here for my other concealer that I can show to you. I used to be a big fan of Bare Minerals, but this is my Makeup Forever concealer. So, but they kept changing the colors around, and as they continued to change the colors, it stopped performing the way it used to on my skin and started leaving this weird sheen to my skin. So I don't use it as much. Sometimes in the summer, as I get darker in the summer, I'll use some Bare Minerals. And I do have a Bare Minerals light foundation that has a SPF in it that I use sometimes in the summer, but I don't use it on a regular basis anymore. On a daily basis, I tend to use the ones that I already mentioned. So that's a little bit about what I wear in terms of makeup, but I don't wear a lot of makeup, and I don't consider myself to be a makeup expert by any stretch of the imagination. I just do what I know how to do and what works for me. But I don't give makeup advice. I don't really, no, I will not be doing, I don't do tutorials. I'm not qualified to do tutorial. And I don't wear pounds of makeup on my face. I see people, I think they look great, but I couldn't imagine putting that amount of makeup on my face every day. And one of my other goals is to protect my skin, to not have breakouts and things like that. So I spend a lot of time cleansing my skin twice a day. I just finished doing that before I started putting makeup on. And I use certain serums to protect my skin, because my skin was a mess about 2 years ago, and a friend of mine turned me on to some things that have really improved my skin. But one of the big things that she doesn't do and that I don't do is wear a lot of makeup, or even wear makeup daily. So I shoot video content a certain number of days a week, and I will wear makeup on those days. But the other days, I don't usually wear foundation. I will just usually put my eyebrows on, which I need to do soon, and I'll probably pause for a minute to do. And I'll put on some lip gloss, maybe some eyeliner. As I get older, I actually don't even wear eyeliner a lot anymore, because I feel like it ages you a lot. For some reason, when you're younger, it makes you, in fact, when you're younger, we wear it because we want it to make us look older. You get older, I actually don't think it necessarily helps you when you're older. So I don't really wear eyeliner a lot unless I'm going out at night and it's a special occasion and I'm trying to achieve a certain look of some kind. But generally speaking, I don't. The other thing is menopause. Menopause, whew, child. Nobody ever told me what this was really, how bad this actually can be, the sweating. And so another reason I don't wear a lot of makeup is because of the sweating. I'm lightly sweating even now. So, and I feel like when you wear heavy powder makeup on your face and you're plugging up your pores, you're going to probably sweat more. So to avoid that, it's another reason why I like to wear powders and not big heavy liquid foundations and things like that. So I kind of have a list of things that I want to go over in this video and talk to you guys about, so that you kind of understand me and understand what motivates me. So that's about my makeup, because someone actually asked about that. And I already spoke to those who have a problem with seeing me put my makeup on. So, you know, if those people hopefully have tuned out at this point, if that's bothering them so much. Right. Now, I did a video, I guess a couple months ago, where I talked about why I decided to become the anti-HR HR lady. And I just mentioned a little bit about that. And I go more in depth in that video, and I will link it here and in the description of this video. So if you want to go watch that video, you can. I'm not going to go over all of the things that I talk about in that video. Instead, I'm going to talk a little bit in this reintroduction about who I am fundamentally as a person and what motivates me to do what I do. And primarily who I am now, who is a very different person than who I was 3 years ago, when I was still on the American corporate plantation, which is what I call it. I'm a fundamentally different person now, right? Now, I have never functioned as a person who put a lot of stock in what other people thought of me. And the reason why I was able to be as effective as I was as a manager and a leader in those spaces for as long as I was, till it burned me out, and was really beginning to break me down. Because, you know, when you try to be an advocate for generally the underdog, and especially for people of color, the powers that be don't like it. And the powers that be are primarily white. They don't like it. And so it took a toll on me over time, because I was never a person who went into these spaces and tried to acquiesce to what they wanted, right? I was not a person who allowed myself to be a tool against people that looked like me, right? And there were many opportunities that I had that I could do that. I'm actually putting on some of the sunscreen foundation because I'm actually going to be going out today. After I shoot my content, I have to go out. I always put sunscreen on. So the moisturizer, ladies, that's a very important thing. Sunscreen, especially black women, because a lot of us think we don't need it. This moisturizer has sunscreen on it. It's sunscreen in it. It's by La Roche-Posay. I believe you can get it in most drugstores in the US, and you can get it on Amazon. Good stuff. One of the things that when I started using it, my skin started clearing up. So I highly recommend it, and it has sunscreen. And it comes in travel sizes. For someone who travels as much as I do, that's an important thing. But this is Bare Minerals tube foundation. It's pretty light, which is why I like it. And it has sunscreen in it. Now, so as I was saying, functioning in these spaces is always difficult as a person of color, and especially a black woman, because you are always being messaged that you're not allowed to be yourself. And all around you, people who don't look like you are being allowed to be themselves. You see people come in, they're yelling and screaming in the office, they're bullying other people, they're intimidating other people, they talk over people in meetings, they speak their mind and say whatever comes to their mind in meetings. But if you do it, you get reprimanded for it. And one of the big struggles for me was that it was always very important to me to be as authentic as possible. And I was constantly battling the people around me, primarily white people, and specifically primarily white women, over them trying to make me be like them, and to pretend and play games and do the fake niceness and all of those things. And then they would engage in, bullying and whisper campaigns when they couldn't get you to do what they wanted you to do. So I was really struggling with that all the time. When I was in corporate, I worked in operations. I had oversight of human resources pretty much in every job I had in the last 20 years. But I had oversight for other functions as well. I had oversight for finance in certain jobs, IT, but always HR. And one of the big tricks that HR always plays on employees is the fake niceness, right? That's why you see so many women, and particularly white women, working in HR, but women generally, because women have been programmed and taught, especially white women, from very small, that smiling and crying and generally just being fake and never really saying what you mean or meaning what you say will get you where you want to go. And on the other hand, black women have been taught that we have to be strong. We've got to be strong for everybody. We have to take as much as possible when it comes to abuse. But we are generally expected in our personal spheres to make a lot of hard decisions and therefore to say things that we mean, right? And so there's a big disconnect when you come into the workplace, where you are being asked to literally be a fake person, and to engage with your work and with your peers in ways that are extremely unauthentic. And that never sat well with me. Some people are able to do it and it bothers them, but they'll still do it. I never was willing to do it. I always felt like if I was going to deal with people, I was going to deal with people as me. And that one of the things that was always important to me was to tell the truth. I was taught to tell the truth in terms of how I was raised. And that was always something that was important to me. And I was not willing to lie to my supervisors, to my staff, to myself about things. And those things can become very difficult when you function in the way that I just described in the corporate space. So, and one of the reasons that I came up behaving that way, as I mentioned in the video, is that I was lucky enough very early in my career, in my first director job, I worked with a black man, a very well-known psychologist that I won't name, but he became my mentor, but first he was my boss. And the fundamental thing that I learned from him was that it was okay for me to be me. And he allowed me to be me. And I worked with him for 8 years. And he taught me that being authentic was my superpower. And so after he retired and a new person took his place, was a black woman who made my life hell, and which is how I ended up cashing out of my first workplace, I wasn't willing to put the real me back into a box at her request, because it had been ingrained in me. And when I went to work for him, I was, I think, 26 or 27 years old. It had been ingrained to me by him that being who I was and telling the truth about things was very important to being a good leader. And that's what I learned from him. And he had a very deft and diplomatic touch in the way that he did things. I never necessarily did it as well as he did, but he always allowed me to be myself. If I was bothered about something, I could go in his office and talk to him about it in a very unvarnished way. I was never punished for it. If there was a problem, he would let me, I could make mistakes, which is something I learned from him, is that it's very important to allow the people who work under you to make mistakes, and that you don't punish people just because they made a mistake, especially the first time they made a mistake. It's very important instead to try to help people learn from their mistakes rather than punishing them. And that was something he taught me. So by the time, after 8 years, right, of working with him, because before him, I was an executive assistant. I worked in a very well-known nonprofit, surrounded by women, primarily white women, who were constantly undermining me, criticizing my communication style, attacking my personality, because I wouldn't let them roll over me. I worked for the president of the company. A lot of them was extremely disrespectful to me because they thought I was a nobody. But executive assistants have a lot of power. And once I figured that out, I used it. And if people messed with me, then they weren't able to get things that they wanted, that they needed me to get. And so a lot of them didn't like me because they didn't like that I wouldn't let them disrespect me. But when I left that job, I got my first director job. And maybe I'll do a story time about how I jumped from executive assistant to director someday, but not today. But when I went into his job, I remember coming into his office, and I came in there with a pad and paper, because that was what I was used to doing, coming in with a pad and paper. And he's talking to me about something, an upcoming board meeting, because part of my job was that I had to prepare the department for our board meetings. And our department reported through a board, as did all departments in the company. It was a membership association. And I was responsible for making sure that we were prepared for the board meetings, and that he had everything he needed for the board meetings. I was responsible for putting the board agenda together, with working with all the other departments that reported to him, and it was 6 or 7. But I was the lead on that, and so he was explaining to me like what I needed to do around that. And I'm sitting there, I'm just taking notes, because used to be an executive assistant. I know how to take notes and then distill them into written documents. And I also was in law school at the time, going to law school in the evening. So taking notes is something I was very good at. And I remember him stopping me and saying, "What are you doing?" And I was like, I'm taking notes of what you're saying. And he was like, I don't want you to take notes. He said, "You're not anybody's executive assistant anymore. You're a director. You don't need to take notes." Right? And I always remember that. He was like, "You don't need to take notes anymore." He's like, "You can write something, a little couple things, but you don't need to be writing down everything I say in the meeting. You're a director now." And something inside of me switched. And early on in my job with him, I had an executive assistant. He was a white male. I had an executive assistant. Imagine that. And he was a white male. And I learned later, and he was very uncooperative, very, very uncooperative. And I learned later that he had applied for the job that I was in, and he didn't get it. And he had a relationship with the person who had been in my job. And I don't know what they had said to him about his likelihood of getting the job, but he really thought he was going to get the job, and then he didn't. So I come into this job, I'm 26 or 27 years old. And he knows a lot about the ins and outs of how the company ran. And a lot of times when I would ask my boss a question, he would tell me to go ask my assistant, because he would be like, he knows how to do all these things. He knows how to get all these things done. And I was supposed to do, and as I said, he was white male, he was gay, and he was ex-military. And I would ask him things and he would say he didn't know, right? We had to put together the board book, and it was a very structured process for doing that. And I asked him a lot of questions about doing that, and he'd tell me he didn't know. So I would ask my boss, and my boss would tell me, you should ask him. And I said, well, I asked him and he said he doesn't know. And so my boss was like, but he does know, right? And it's his responsibility to give you this information. And at one point, I believe my boss called him into the office and had a conversation with him. So basically, he was undermining me. He was trying to not give me information because he wanted me to fail. Okay. And right before we were supposed to finalize the book, because there was a whole process of putting all the information into the book, and then you had to take it and get the book printed, and they had to print a certain number of the books and have them shipped to the board members a certain number of weeks before the board meeting, so that when they came to the board meeting, they had the board books with them and they had had time to read the agenda. And then I was responsible for structuring the meeting, running the meeting, and so on, which I excelled at. But right before we were supposed to get the bulk of the work done, he takes off and tells me he has a reservist assignment and he's in the reserves and he's going to have to be out for that week, right? And he did that because he did not want to help me do the books. He wanted me to mess the books up. And I realized that all after the fact. But my thing was, no matter what, I was going to get these books done, and I was going to make sure they were done right. So what I did was, I'm in law school, I'm a student, and one thing you learn as a lawyer is how to do research. So what I did was, I went down to the print shop, which is where they printed the books at the time. I'm sure all of this stuff is electronic now, but back then it was all hard copy. And I also went to colleagues and I asked to get prior copies of board books. And I sat up into the wee hours of the night in my office, my windowed, cornered office, and read every single board book from the last year or 2 years, so that I not only understood how to construct the book, I understood what the board had been talking about, what the issues were that they were dealing with, right? And then I put the book together by myself. And one of the things I was responsible for doing was making a mock copy of the book and then giving it to my boss, okay? And so I remember bringing the book to him for him to look at it, because this is my first time doing it. And it was the only time I think he ever had me show him the book after that. And he looked and he went through the book and he said, well, so-and-so is out. Who helped you with this? And I said, nobody helped me. And he probably found a couple little typo things that I got wrong, that I'd missed. But the substance of the book was perfect. And that's what he said to me. And he was really surprised that I had figured out how to do it myself. And he said to me, this person is not doing their job if they're not helping you. And as their boss, you have a right to discipline them and even remove them if this continues. But I'm leaving it to you for you to deal with that. And so when homeboy came back to the office, I called him into my office and I had a little come to Jesus with him. And basically the gist of it was that I let him know that I recognized what he was doing. And I let him know that if he could not work with me as his manager, that it would behoove him to find another job and do so quickly. Because if something that like what he did happened again, I would have to write him up. He put in his resignation within 2 or 3 weeks later, and I got to hire my own assistant. So that's how that worked out. But the gist of it is to say that I had a lot of challenges. The things I talk about to you guys, I have personally experienced them. And from the very first time I was a director in management, I experienced these things. I also experienced them when I wasn't a manager, right? So the things that I'm speaking of are my lived experience, and I know the lived experience of many of you. But the point was that I learned early on that it was okay for me to be myself. And so I was always resistant after that in every job I went to. And in the nonprofit sector, a lot of leadership is white and female, right? And over again, I would be in situations where these people would want me to operate like them, which is double talk, don't say what you mean, act really fragile, and if you don't win the argument, you cry. I wasn't willing to do any of that. And I also wasn't willing to undermine people, talk behind people's back, gaslight people, right? I have never been a person who participated in mean girl stuff at work, right? And so I was never someone that was loved because I was never willing to join the clique. And unfortunately, a lot of times when I've worked in environments predominantly staffed by women and led by women, unfortunately, women have a way of turning their workplaces into cliques. And I'm not saying men don't have things that they do that are problematic as well, because I could go on and on about the problems working with men. But I'll be honest that that's one of the things I never experienced dealing with men, is that they didn't turn the workplace into a clique where someone's in and someone's out based on whether they went to lunch with you or whether they had coffee with you or whether they gossiped with you. And so I struggled a lot in corporate America because I wasn't willing to do those things. I just wanted to come and do my job and do a good job, but I didn't want to engage in office drama, right? And so one of the things I struggled throughout my career was dealing with that, as well as dealing with the reality that even when you're put in leadership positions, white people don't like it when you tell them what to do. They'll hire you to tell them what to do, and they want you to tell everybody else what to do, but they don't want you to tell them. Right? So they don't mind if you go tell other people that look like you what to do, but they don't like it when you tell them they're doing something wrong or that they're violating a policy or that they need to do something differently, even when that's your literal job. And as a person who oversaw operations, which is basically running the inside functions of a company, so it's administration, it's HR, it's IT, it's finance, you constantly have to tell people to do things differently, because a lot of what you're asking people to do is compliance with either company policy or compliance with actual laws. And so I learned really fast that people don't want you to tell them what to do, especially if you're not tap dancing, right? Skinning and grinning and cheesing and almost apologizing to them for asking them to not break the law, to not break company policy, to do their damn jobs, right? Because when you're a black woman, they don't like that. So I was dealing with that as well. So, I always pushed back against it, and I always ended up leaving jobs, because my position is that if you are a black woman in a position of authority, if you're afraid to use the power you have, then you don't have any power, right? Use the power that you have. You use it for good and not for evil. You use it to help build people up, not to break them down. And you use it to bring people who are marginalized and under-recognized or not recognized at all into the circle. And I used my power to do those things. So, of course, that always rocked the boat, too, because it was like, wait a minute, we hired one black person and now there are 10 black people working here. How did that happen? Why? Because I went out and hired them and then had them hire some more. That's why. Because basically, if there weren't any black people there when I got there and other people of color, they were going to be there when I left. So I was very focused and always had a diverse team. And that means I hired a little bit of everybody. But whoever I didn't have at all, I made sure I went out and found them. And that meant always hiring black people and other people of color, right? And as well as making sure that they were the best people for the job, obviously. But I made sure that I went out and found some black and brown folk. And that also didn't make people happy, right? Because, hiring whoever you want is for them, but not for us. But my position was, I'm the director, I'm the vice president, I'm hire who I want. And if you challenge me, I'm going to call out your racism. And I did, right? And at some point, I'll probably do a video about a very specific instance where I had to call people out on their racism, as well as the fact that they were breaking laws, hiring and immigration laws, and had the nerve to accuse me of being racist because they said I hired a whole bunch of black people. And I was like, well, the thing is, the black people I hire are qualified. They were brought in, they were interviewed, they were selected based on their knowledge, skills, and ability, and they happened to be black. And because we didn't have any black people, they were hired as the best candidate. Meanwhile, you're over here just hiring this one type of person. We are not the same, right? So you deal with all of those things. So over years, and I was in corporate for 20 something years, those things really start to tear at you, because you realize, no, you go from one job to the next job, and it's fine. Usually, sometimes it's fine for 6 months, sometimes it's fine for a year, but it always become a problem for me within about 2 years or so, because I had a responsibility often for building HR departments, because a lot of times I would go into nonprofits, they hired me to build out their HR department because they didn't have one or it wasn't functioning properly. And then when I told them there are laws that they had to comply with, they didn't want to. And that would be an issue, right? So after the last time, I just couldn't take it anymore and I left. I couldn't do it anymore. And I could not go to another plantation because I knew it was going to be the same script, different cast. And I just didn't want to do it anymore. But that's part of how, I think. And so for the last 3 years, I have very much been functioning as a free human being for the first time in my life, where I get up in the morning and I get to decide what I'm going to do with my day. And I'm lucky enough that what I get to do with my day helps other people, and especially helps people that look like me, whether it's taking a group of Black women to Africa for the first time, which I did in January, or it's helping a sister make her employer pay her because they're breaking the law and they're abusing her. I get to now do work that makes me feel good every day, that I can look in the mirror and say, I'm doing something that matters. And I didn't always feel that way, not even about the work I was doing. Because, when you're working in a nonprofit world, you learn really quickly that even though they talk really good talk about how they're trying to help people, they're not. They're all in there raising money, paying their executives a whole bunch of money, and doing very little for the communities they claim they're trying to serve. Or they're taking a lot of government money, either state, local, or federal money, and a lot of them are misusing it. I could write a whole book about the nonprofit sector. And I've worked in multiple areas of nonprofit. I've worked in, community service nonprofits. I've worked in reproductive rights. Don't even get me started about that, those nonprofits. I've worked in international development. So I've seen it all. And so that also over time bothered me, because I stayed in the nonprofit arena because I wanted to know that I was using my legal education as well as my management experience, because I graduated, from law school already in a management job. And I decided to stay in management instead of going into private practice. And because I was working in a nonprofit, and at the time I was doing work that I really enjoyed with a supervisor and mentor that I really loved and respected. But once he retired, I had to make a decision after all of the bullying and the harassment that I experienced. And I left and went to another company where I had to end up leaving because they were extremely racist. And they had to pay me to leave. And then I went into another job where they were more passively racist, but extremely corrupt. So you just keep going from one place to the next place to the next place. And then the next place after that was good for a while until it wasn't. Because again, it was white female led. There were a lot of cliques, a lot of women undermining each other, like all across the company. It was terrible. And I'll do stories about that as well at some point. So I just was tired of dealing with all of that stuff. But I'm finally getting to do work that I really like doing. I like what I do and I like how I do it. And I created this channel so that I could provide more information to people who need to have it, which are employees. And not just American employees, but just employees. Because one of the things I have learned in my work is that human resources functions the same pretty much everywhere. And I created this work to teach people how to deal with human resources in their workplace in order to get the things that they need, especially when their rights are being violated. Because human resources functions to protect the company. They are not there to protect you as an employee. And they lie from the first day on every website, when you come into a new job, when you're being recruited, when you're being oriented, they tell you how they're there for the employees and they're there to help you and just come to us if there's a problem. All that's a lie. Because the reality is they are there to protect the company. And the reason they tell you to come to them first is because they want to know first so that they can get rid of you if there's a problem. Not because they're going to try to solve your problem. And I came out knowing that. And even as an executive, when you rock the boat, they come for you too, and just as hard. right? You're not protected either, even when you created the department and hired the people, because the way the system functions requires that HR protect the company. So even if the HR person themselves is a good person and they want to do the right thing, which I was one of those people, you literally find that you can't. Now, in roles where I was actually in a vice president role and I had more influence, I was able to steer the company in a lot of ways of doing things the right way, right? When it came to how you go about terminating an employee, making sure that you're terminating a person for reasons that are related to their work and not biased or racist, right? And I refused in many instances to allow people to fire people if they could not show that it was performance related. And, you know, the Beckys and the Karens didn't like me for that. I remember one of my jobs, the first 2 weeks I was there, this woman comes in, one of my people come in and tell me one of the directors wants to fire somebody. And it was a black girl. She's actually African immigrant. I worked in international development, so there are a lot of African employees because we were doing work in those sectors in the continent as well as in other parts of the world. And she wanted to fire this person. And she provided no documentation related to the performance of the person, but was demanding that HR terminate this person and bring this person in and just fire this person. And I said, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. And I was like, I want documentation of her performance, right? And if you can't provide that to me, you can't fire her. Oh, she was mad. She's big mad. And she started telling me about how my predecessor used to do stuff. And my predecessor, before I came to the company, they didn't have someone over operations. They had operations in someone else's job. And the president had decided to split it because she believed it needed to be its own function. And they had a manager for HR who had no prior experience in HR, who was just the pet, and it was a black woman, who was just the pet of one of the white women that worked there, who was a vice president. And so she did whatever she was told. And she would take people apparently into a room and just summarily fire them because she was told to. And so this person was like, well, when so-and-so was here, and I said, I had to tell them, I am not the manager of HR. I am the vice president. Okay? And as vice president, I'm making this call and you're not firing this person. And my HR person is not going to fire this person on your behalf until you present these things that I'm asking for. And so she couldn't fire the person until we were satisfied that the person had been given an opportunity to address the issues and didn't. In this case, the person just simply couldn't do the job she was hired for. And they should have never hired her in the first place. That's the other thing. But they had to give this person an opportunity to address the issues and to show that they could not meet the metrics that they were given via PIP before they were allowed to fire the person. And they didn't like that because they were used to being able to just do whatever. Say, well, we're an at-will employer. And I was like, you still don't get to fire employees without having grounds, especially employees in protected classes with protected characteristics, such as this employee. You're not going to fire this person unless you can prove that it's not discriminatory and it's related to her performance. And to do that, you need to give her a certain amount of time, be very clear about what she's not doing and what she needs to do to correct it, and give her an opportunity. If she can't do those things by the end of that period, then you can fire her, right? And no, you can't just put her on a PIP and not be very concrete about what the deficits are and what she concretely needs to do to address them, right? Because that's what you're supposed to do. You can fire people as an employee, but you should do it the right way and you should be fair about it. So I was not beloved by a lot of the Karens and the Beckys because I wouldn't do their bidding. And their boss, who was previously over my department, couldn't control me because I wasn't her pet. And incidentally, it was funny because she's the one who had recruited me for the job, because she and I knew each other professionally and she admired me. She'd heard me speak in forums and so on, and she admired me. I don't know what made her think that I was somebody she could control, but she quickly found out that I was not, and trying to be my friend and take me to coffee and tell me the concerns of the Karens and the Beckys, that they didn't feel that I listened to them. And I was like, I'm not here to listen to a small sector of the company. I'm here to listen to everyone. In other words, I'm not here to be your puppet, right? So I function now understanding how all of these things happen to women that look like me in these spaces. right? It's one of the reasons I'm working on putting together a training specifically for Black women in senior management positions, because people like who I used to be deal with very specific things and very specific pressures. And that is the reason why some of them fold and allow themselves to be used as weapons against other Black women and other Black employees. Or they just simply crash and fold and leave the workforce because they don't want to do those things. Or they just don't want to be a puppet. They don't want to be treated as a mascot, right? Which is another thing that a lot of us deal with, is that we're the first, we're the only, and they just want to trot us out to say, see, we're not racist. We have a Black woman doing HR, usually is where they like to put us. We got a Black woman running our HR. See, we're not racist, right? So, and you know, you get hired and because I was the first and the only at the time. I remember we had a Black History Month function at a job I was in, and the staff put together a question about the company and diversity. And one of the questions was, who's the first executive ever at the company? And the answer was me. And everybody thought that was great, and I thought it was very sad that I would be the first one and the only one they had ever had, right? And those things don't happen by accident, right? Those things are intentional. When you don't have people of color in a company, or you don't have any Black people in a company, because people of color and Black people are not the same to me, it's because you intentionally don't want them there. And the reason a lot of times they don't want them there is because they don't want to have to deal with their racism. They don't want to have to deal with the issues. So they rather not have anyone that's going to point them out. Even when they hire you and part of your job is to point those things out, then they get mad at you when you do, right? So one of the things I learned, through that process was that I couldn't function completely as a free person, right? But I also learned that it was okay for me to use my power. And I really want more of us to learn that it's okay for us to use it as well, and to use it the right way. And if they don't like you for it and they want to fire you for it, let them. Just make sure they cut the check, okay? But don't let them use you as a puppet to hurt other people, especially other people that look like you. But functioning on my own as a free person has been one of the great joys of my life. And it is something that I wish more of us could experience, something that I hope more of us can experience, something that I've been lucky enough to help many employees that have worked with me experience. Because, people always say that money can't buy you happiness, and it's true, right? Money can't buy you happiness, but money gives you options to do things that may bring you happiness and joy, right? So money matters. I am not against capitalism. I always tell people that. But I am against the hyper capitalism that is in place in the United States. I'm against the white supremacist hyper-capitalism system that exists in the United States. I don't think capitalism itself, it's how it's practiced in the US that's problematic, because it's money above all. It's money above human beings' health, human beings' safety, human beings' equality, everything. That if it threatens a company, rich people's bottom line, then they get to use their money to make sure that the small people, and who's the smallest besides the most marginalized people in a society, right? The poor and the marginalized are the people that they want to ensure remain, because capitalism doesn't work without an underclass. It doesn't work. I took economics in college. I don't know how many of y'all did, but if you did, you remember that. Capitalism can't work without an underclass. Who's the underclass? Can't work without workers. Who are the workers? And so you see very clear shifts happening now to ensure that there's an underclass, to ensure, for example, that there are homeless people that you can lock up now just for sleeping outside, so that the prison, for-profit prison system can keep making their money. Because their beds, they got empty beds, y'all, all across the country. They're not making money. Their stocks are down. Because people are not committing crimes the way they're telling you they are, they're not. Violent crime is down. They need to criminalize somebody and fast. So now they have, let states know, because this was one state that brought this case, Oregon. It was a town in Oregon. That's how this ended up in front of the Supreme Court, right? Now they can put, other states and cities will do the same thing. They will criminalize sleeping outside while not doing anything to address the homeless situation. They're not going to do nothing about affordable housing. They're not going to build more shelters. They're not going to build tiny home villages for homeless people to have somewhere to live. They're not going to do any of that. They're just going to lock your ass up in a prison that belongs to a rich white man so they can make a lot of money. Right? So that's what I have a problem with. I have a problem with a court and a government that says that it's okay for public officials to take bribes, which the Supreme Court just said, that the president is a king, which the Supreme Court has just said, all in service of a system that makes its money off of exploiting the poor and the marginalized. So I'm not against capitalism. I'm just against American capitalism. Okay. But I am lucky to have positioned myself to leave that system, not completely behind, but to leave a country where I did not feel safe and where I felt like a second-class citizen. Because Black people are second-class citizens. If you're not equal, you're not a first-class citizen. You're not an equal citizen. So my, desire in doing this work is to help others have the same options. And it doesn't mean that I think every Black person is going to leave or even should leave the U.S. But I want people to have choices to do what they want to do. That if you want to start a business, having some seed money from your racist former employer helps, right? If you want to start a consulting business, having some money from your racist former employer helps, right? So if you want to move to another country, having some money from your racist former employer helps. So I just want more of us to know that that's an option and that you don't have to go pay an attorney a $10,000, $15,000 retainer in order to leave with a check. Now, there are circumstances under which it's better to go to an attorney, but I want employees to know that there's actually another option that they may not be aware of. How do I know? Because I've exercised the option more than once. And yes, it helps that I have a law degree, but it more importantly helped that I understood how HRs and companies work. How I figured out how to do what I did was based on my understanding of human resources. It helped to know the law, but more importantly, it helped because I understood, because I ran HR, why HR existed and how HR responds or doesn't respond when an employee raises concerns about discrimination, and that many HR departments and companies are willing to pay employees who raise these issues effectively. They're willing to pay you to leave because it's easier than them having to pay lawyers and insurance companies and going into court and laying all their business bare and having it become public record. A lot of them would much rather pay someone, buy their right to sue from them, because that's basically what they're buying when they pay you to leave, and let you go on about your business. So I was able to do this. I actually was able to help friends of mine do it when I was, working in the corporate private nonprofit sector. And so as I left, I decided that I would continue doing it, that I would start a business and I would provide, HR advice, because I don't just talk about this with clients. I've given clients advice about negotiating job offers. I have given clients advice about how best to construct a contract for a bid proposal as they're moving from being employee to becoming a consultant, how to, build a rate system to charge. I just was talking to somebody about that the other day. I have given people advice about how to ask for promotion and successfully get it. I have, advised people about how to effectively use professional development to learn certain things and do certain things. I give all kinds of HR advice, but I'm always really happy to help people who are dealing with discrimination in their workplace. And there are so many. There's so many. And to help them determine, one, whether in fact it is discrimination, two, how to document it effectively, three, how to present their concerns effectively, and four, how to ask for an exit based on the presentation of their concerns. So, the reason that I created the business is because I wanted to make sure that more people knew this information and understood how HR functions. So I do not give legal advice. Do not come to me for legal advice. If you want legal advice, go to an attorney, right? What I do is very specific, and it's about giving employee-focused human resources support and advice to employees to ensure that they understand their rights and they especially understand how to assert their rights when their rights are being violated. And so all of the products, all of the work that I do is in furtherance of that mission that I've just mentioned, because it was clear to me when I came out of that environment that I couldn't find anybody to do what I wanted to do, and I want to be the person that I needed. That's basically what I want. I want to be the person that I needed when I was going through these things, and I didn't have a person like me to go to. I was lucky to have friends. Many of my friends are lawyers. I was very, very lucky to be in law school at the time when the first situation occurred. So I had professors to talk to. I could research the law myself. I was able to understand certain things because I was dealing with the same race discrimination situation. So it was complex. And so I want to be the person that I needed when I was 32 years old. And this happened to me for the first time. And I didn't know what to do. And I had to figure it out. Most of it I had to figure out myself with help from professors at my law school, doing research. My best friend was a lawyer, but she was a criminal. Her primary area of practice was criminal defense law. So actually, she couldn't help me a lot with the law part because she didn't know anything about it, but she was a great support system during that time. So by the time I went through that and then went through the second time, when I got to the third time, I knew exactly what to do, right? And so I really wanted to help other people understand what their rights are, and that's why I do what I do, right? That's the primary reason I do what I do. So my social media platform, I use primarily to give advice, tips, comments about human resources to help people better understand it and how it functions, and also to give people advice about recognizing discrimination, because a lot of us do not know what discrimination is. And that's very clear to me when I do these calls, that a lot of people don't know what discrimination is and isn't. I've done a video, I'll link it here in the description as well, about what discrimination is and isn't and how to recognize it, right? Everything is not discrimination, because if everything was discrimination, then nothing would be discrimination. So it's important for you to know what it actually is, because some employers can be bullies. They can be harassers. They can create hostile, toxic work environments, and it doesn't mean it's discriminatory. So, but often it is, but not always. So it's very important to know the difference. I will be honest with you guys. Sometimes this work really is triggering, and it takes an emotional toll on me. I think about, sometimes I'm joking, but in a way I'm serious. I do think about quitting a lot, about shutting this shit down and just focusing on my travel business. I do think about that a lot, because sometimes it can be very stressful. People come to me when they are dealing with significant trauma in their work environments, and they're traumatized, they're angry, they're sad. And sometimes people want to just throw all their trauma onto you, right? Sometimes people are they're not very nice. They're angry, and they want to throw their anger on you because they can't throw it on the person or system that they really want to throw it on. So sometimes I really am like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this, right? And the only reason I keep doing it is because I know that people need it. I got an email last week from someone who took my master course, and she was writing to thank me because she had been able to use what she learned to get out of a job, and now she's starting her own business, and she's writing a book. And that message really came at a time when I really needed it to come, because I was seriously thinking, like, this is really a lot, and I don't know if I want to keep doing it. I'm balancing it with running another business. This is hard. Sometimes I just, need to drink a glass of wine at the end of the day, because some of the stories that I hear are so horrendous, and then they trigger my own trauma, because I've also been through a lot of things myself as an employee. It's not always easy to do this work, but I keep doing it because of people like the lady who wrote me the email, because I know that I'm helping somebody's life be different than what they thought it could be. And I'm helping people leave environments that they thought they didn't have any options. A lot of us stay because we think we don't have other options. We're afraid, and we think we don't have other options. And I really love knowing that I'm helping people, first of all, set their fear aside and do what is necessary for their self-respect, right? and also holding employers accountable for some of the things that they're doing in these workplaces and confronting those things and holding them accountable. And so I'm really glad that I'm able to help employees do that, right? Especially Black women employees, because a lot of us are the ones that are catching a lot of the hell. So because I'm trying to do this work without it becoming too traumatizing for me, I do have a lot of boundaries. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that before I stop this video. I do have very hard boundaries around this work. I do discovery calls up to 3 days a week, 2 to 3 days a week now. I do them for up to 2 to 3 hours a day, and then I stop for the day. And I take my work very seriously. I expect people to respect my time, and I expect people to respect my boundaries. And I know a lot of us as Black people, especially as Black women, have been trained through the workforce and society at large that we don't have a right to have boundaries. But one of the things that I have learned a long time ago is that boundaries are what you need to have to protect yourself. And so I do have boundaries, and I take them very seriously. Please do not send me emails with, case studies of what's going on with your work. I'm not going to read them. Please do not send me documents from your job and ask me to read them and tell you what to do. I'm not going to. This is what I do for a living. If you want to use my time, you should pay me for my time. It's very, I never cease to be amazed by the reality that society really devalues Black women and our time, and that even Black people do that to us, and other Black women will do it. And I don't tolerate that. So don't come into my DMs. Don't come into the comments writing these long paragraphs. If you want to talk to me about an HR situation, book a discovery call. It costs $55, which is a fraction of what my actual time cost, because I also know the value of my time, right? And if you want me to work with you to help you resolve the problem, you can engage with me as a client and we can work together to resolve the problem. But I don't work for free. And I don't want to set any expectations that I do, because I do not. Do I give advice during the discovery calls? Yes. But no problem you have is likely to be resolved in a 20-minute discovery call. What I use those calls for is to assess the situation that you have and determine whether I think I can help you. Even when I don't think I can help the person, I will still, give them some thoughts about what their next steps might be. And I often will give referrals if I think an attorney is someone they should talk to next. But please do not send me files, long emails. Don't do it, because I'm not going to read them. If you want me to use my time to read a file or to read a lengthy email and analyze it and tell you what you should do, then you need to pay me for my time. That's my boundary. And that might upset some people, and that's okay. It's okay, because I have learned that my boundaries are mine. It's my responsibility to set them, and I can't be concerned if somebody doesn't like that, right? So I want to be very clear about that as well, so that people are not running to book discovery calls with me because they think they're going to get a bunch of free advice. I try to give all of my free advice through this channel and through my other social media platforms, TikTok as well. Not as much on Instagram, but on TikTok and on this platform. So if there is a question that you have that you think will benefit not just yourself, but other people, right? And that could be a lot of different kinds of questions as employees. Ask the question in the comment. If I think it's a good question, I'll make a video about it and answer it for everybody's benefit, right? If there's a question that you have, just ask it in the comments. And I won't respond necessarily in the comments to your question unless it's a short, fast answer. But if it's a good question, I'll make a video about it and tell you, what I think about what you asked and give a resolution if it's the question that I think will benefit everyone. I try to give as much as possible free advice on my channel and platform. So it's always helpful when people ask questions or even suggest a topic that you would like me to talk about in a future video. And then I will try to go through it and make a list of things and then systematically make videos. Some of the really great topics that I've made about videos have been from questions that people have asked either on TikTok or comments people have made on TikTok, as well as on this YouTube channel. So that's something that you can definitely do. People also have asked a lot in the comments recently what they can do to support my work. What you can do to support my work is share my videos with other people, like my videos, comment, subscribe to my channel. If you want to support me in some financial way, you can do a super like on YouTube, or you can buy me a coffee using the link in the in the description of this video. I don't really, feel that you have to do those things, but if you want to do those things, you can. The number one thing I would love for you to do is like my videos, watch them, like them, not just this one, but sit down one day with a glass of wine and watch them all. If you have the time, but watch them. It will benefit you so much. So watch them and like them and subscribe to the channel. That's like the number one thing that you can do to support my work, and tell other people about me, right? If you don't need my services or don't need the advice right now, but you know somebody who you think might, share a video with them, have them book a discovery call. That's the number one thing you can do to support my work. The other thing that you can do is to provide constructive comments. I am trying to build a community, a supportive community here of employees who are keen to understand their rights and exercise them at work. I am not interested in snarky comments, critical comments, trolling, any of that. You don't have to agree with everything I say, but I also am not interested in a soliloquy from you about why you don't agree with what I said. You can go make your own video if you want, right? So this is not, a democracy here. This is my platform. And so if you have comments, make sure they're constructive. You want to talk about your own experience, that is really helpful. And I also encourage people, there's a lot of trauma in the comments in my last couple videos, and it's heartbreaking to me how much trauma there is. Please follow Dr. Kimani Norrington Sands. Please think about therapy. I just advised someone the other day, after just listening to her for 10 minutes, please, therapy. I am not a therapist. I don't give any advice related to therapy. But a therapy is something that a lot of us need after we leave these environments, because they're traumatizing as hell, right? So don't just write out a long comment talking about what happened to you. You can do that. But I also really beg us to go into therapy, talk to a professional, try to work through and resolve these feelings, because if you don't, they show up in other parts of your life, and they may also impact your ability to be effective at work at the next job, because you're traumatized from the former job. So I really encourage you guys to take that to heart as well. I really hope this video has helped in helping you understand who I am, what I do, especially those of you who are new. I hope that you will continue to support my channel, that you will continue to make constructive comments, that you will continue to share this content with other people that you think need it. Some of you have already done that, and I thank you, appreciate it very much. I plan to continue to, as long as I possibly can, to continue to create content and provide support to employees, especially Black women who are working in American workplaces. My work is not just for people in corporate America, but that's the context of a lot of what I talk about, because that's where I came from. But the things that I talk about are impacting employees everywhere, in every sector, in every sector, whether it's for-profit, nonprofit, private, corporate, service industries. I'm going to be doing an updated video soon about my 2024 picks for the worst places to work for Black women. I'll link that in this video too. I did one for last year. And so this September, I'll be doing one for this year, because I did it September of last year. So I'll do it every September. But I'll be doing that to talk about some of the worst places that for Black women, based on my discovery calls with current, past clients, and just calls I've done with people in 2024, what sectors I believe are the worst for Black women. And you can watch my video, which I'll link here and link in the description, about who I picked for 2024 and why. And then I'll be doing an updated video. The rankings are going to change a little bit. Some of the rankings are going to change a little bit. And I might be expanding the list for this year, because these employers are buck wild. But anyway, I hope this video was helpful. I hope it gave you some more context about me and who I am. And as I always say, HR is not your enemy, but they're definitely not your friend. But I am. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.